certain shirt from this exact same place, but there's a online pin shop. They just mostly do acrylic pins, and they're mostly pop culture based. But it's called Patti LaPelle, and which I always thought that was funny. And
sorry, I am a huge Patti LaPelle fan. So that was why I jumped up, kind of.
Right. So they do these really like limited run hats and shirts, and then and their kind of bread and butter is pins. They actually have a Nicole Kidman, Even Heartbreak Feels Good Here in pin. It's like her in the AMC pin. So they did this one, and they sold it. You know, they did a very limited run of like 30, and I missed out on the first run, and this is the second run. And the thing that says Together Again in the back, but that's the only difference of the two different versions of the hat. But yes, I'm a huge Muppets fan. Big Statler and Waldorf.
I love that. I remember vividly the Muppets little TV show, but the Muppets Babies.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I loved it. My parents were big on, and my entertainment kind of taught me life lessons, and they did well. They did it well.
Nice.
Very well. But I like the hat. I like the font mix up, actually.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
So today we have a special guest with us. Who are you?
Yeah, so Devin Goodman. I am a just about town person, I guess, busybody.
Ooh, I like that.
This is why she's here.
Devin about town.
Yeah,
that would be a good podcast name right there.
So my actual podcast is a Goodman's Education Conversation, and it's just one little short series breaking down education, looking at the history of it, advocacy, giving some parents some tips, and why we have to really look at the system of education, and it has to change, kind of thing.
It has to be burned.
Yeah, pretty much. At this point, we're just going to be picking through ashes for the good stuff, and it's going to be very little.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I get to teach in higher education, and I don't have to deal with some of the bureaucracy in K through 12. There's still plenty of bureaucracy in higher education that I just want to set a match to.
So much.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I'm angry.
I think a lot of people are angry that are still in the classrooms in K through 12, and they are just, bless their hearts, the last men standing, pretty much. Yes. I think about when I taught in Latvia, they had a phrase because they'd just gone through their really bad recession and everybody was leaving that was under the age of like 30, and it was turn the lights out before you go, because the airport turned, and that's kind of what's happening in education right now is if you're the last one, turn the lights out.
Last man out, turn the lights out.
The good news is we've got lots of money that's pouring into the educational system, right? And a lot of good people that are putting that are pulling their own personal politics out of it aside and doing what's really truly best for the children. I mean, that's clear.
Yes.
Right?
So there.
Thank goodness. And teachers are very well compensated for their work.
Ooh, that's what will pick out the dust, y'all.
So, Devin, you're here today to talk with us about The Woman King, right?
I'm
Gina Prince-Bythewood's latest film starring Viola Davis.
Yes.
Where do you guys want to start?
I don't really know. I mean,
okay, everybody liked it. That's where we start, right?
Yeah, yes,
absolutely.
Yes,
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 All right.
yes. I mean, here's one of the things that I thought first sitting down to watch it. It is a really good action film. Like, first and foremost, it's an action film with a message or with messages, but those messages aren't didactic. I don't find those messages too heavy-handed or hitting me over the head, and I really appreciate that I can just kind of let the action film form do that work of then filling in the content or letting the content kind of grow from there.
Yes, I could see that. I really appreciated it, and I took it from the perspective of, one, I did not realize it was going to be an action film. So there were definitely moments where clutching but enjoyed, but I took it as a kind of, Shea Coulee's Drag, a love letter to Black women. And at the end of the day, everything wasn't for everybody, but as a Black woman watching it, by the way, I'm Black, y'all, it was really cool to just sit there and take it in. And the friend I went to see it with is non-Black, white woman, but also was like, you that hit, didn't it? And I was like, yes, this was great.
Yeah, this was a film made by black women,
right?
Except for Maria Bello, who came up with the story, which is
oh my goodness, but it's in line with her very much. True. It is very much in line with who she is.
Yeah, but it's made by black women, starring black women, about black women, and the screening I was at was well diverse. Okay. And even like families and young and old.
I could see that.
And I went opening weekend, and it was a pretty full theater too.
Yeah, it's done really well. What I think I love about it so much is that it, like you said, it's not didactic. It presents these ideas and these. Again, it just presents this story and this scenario without having to over-explain it. They never go into having to explain why they're women warriors or why. It's just presented to you as something to take as fact. They never go in and never apologize for it at all, and then just let the audience take it in as if it were any other movie that Hollywood has put out over the past century, where about war essentially, and obviously family and all the other things and all the other trappings that come with your typical movie. But also, yes, it was very popcorn, blockbustery. This was just a good sit down, and there were themes to be taken out of it, but you could also just take this on its surface of, I'm going to see some people kick some ass,
right?
But to your point too, of presenting women of color and so much what appears to be, and y'all apologize if I say this wrong, but where these are women who they all have different body types, they all look like they're they all look like they're just athletes, right? They're just they all look like warriors in different. And they're and that was one of the things, and we can talk about it more, just plot line, but how the Goyet found the different specialties of all the different types of people and all the different types of women that would come to them and how they could fight. Yeah.
Yes.
And Viola Davis and I think Prince-Bythewood have talked about this, about how they fought for specific actors.
Yes.
Specific actors of specific color, hair type that looked a certain way, and they don't shy away from this, which is so. I mean, Viola Davis is in her 50s, and she's like, no, just own it, right? We don't have to pretend that I'm not. But I think that makes it all the more powerful.
Right. I thought it was really cool, especially because on that historical side, it's very accurate that they would, for the type of kingdom they were, have a diverse group of women, especially the offering too of you can bring your child here, and then on the fact of they really were intentional that those women were able to show up from. I got the hairstyles that are very specific to certain tribes, to even you could look at Bone Strucker and be like, oh, I know that this is what tribe you were representing from this time period in culture. And I even liked the fact that Viola Davis's right-hand woman.
Agoze.
Yes.
Oh, no, wait. No.
The super, super tall one.
Sheila Tim is the actress. I forget
her name. But she... oh my goodness, with just her facial expressions, was able to convey so much. And even then I was like, I know that they came to her and were like, who would you represent? And so I was really glad everything came in sync, because I've seen them talk about it. And then on the same side of it, you're right about the fact that it's just a good, let's have some battles, which is the director's kind of brand from what I've learned.
It's part of her brand. Aminza is her name.
Thank you.
One reason, so The Old Guard, Gina Prince-Bythewood directed The Old Guard, which starring Charlize Theron, Kiki Lane, and hot Martin Eden from the film Martin Eden. If you haven't seen it, it's great. Those battles are so much more spectacular, too. They're slicker, right?
Yes.
Prince-Bythewood was an athlete, was a college athlete, like a high-level athlete. Yeah. She understands how these bodies should move and how these bodies should look going through these motions. I think that comes through really clearly. She's like, no, this is how you're going to move, and they're going to work on that and work on that and work on that.
I did not know that. That makes so much sense, because in The Old Guard, one of my favorite scenes is at the very end, not to spoil, but also it's been out a while ago.
No, we spoil
yes. No worries. This is not a non-spoiler podcast.
If you haven't seen The Woman King, stop the podcast right now. Go find a place to go see it, and then come back.
Yes. Old Guard on Netflix, and catch it, because 2 is coming out soon. Mm-hmm. But the scene where the Italian, I believe, lover
That's Hot
the
Martin
guy.
Eden.
Yes, flips the guy and snaps his
Breaks
head.
his neck.
I have
Breaks
never
his back.
seen that
Yeah.
ever.
It was a really cool scene.
And it was
so good. It was
Yes.
so good. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a fun movie too.
Yeah.
It's funny just because Netflix has such a history of putting out such garbage, especially
Yes.
their and again they'll pepper in one of these movies like The Old Guard.
That's how they get us.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So then we get suckered into watching something like Red Notice or like these other terrible films. I was really taken aback by how good it was. Although my only complaint about The Old Guard is that it almost seemed like that would be better suited for a series. It had so much story to tell.
Same.
Well, it's based off of a graphic novel, I
Yes.
believe.
Yes.
Which seems, I don't read graphic novels. Not that there's anything wrong with graphic novels,
your breath.
but
Here we go.
but I know. It's not fucking Flaubert. Last time I talked about Zola, so I
Right.
bring in Flaubert.
Oh, okay.
Graphic novels seem more episodic just in nature.
Yes.
And so I think that's why I would have that kind of series.
Yeah,
feel to
I
it.
don't know if it was. I don't know. I don't know much about the graphic novel, so I don't.
You
I don't
read
know
graphic novels either. You're giving me shit for it.
No, I'm just waiting for your diatribe. Is this going off on here's Brock's corner on what he hates about popular culture.
That's the next podcast.
It's a new segment.
Okay, gotcha.
So I don't know if it was like a weekly. So a lot of times graphic novels are just compilations of
Right.
individual comics, right? I mean, so I don't know if it was an individual comic or if it was just put out as The Old Guard. I would assume that there's more story to tell, and clearly they were setting it up. The end of Old Guard is setting it up for.
Oh yes.
Yeah, to go on and to continue.
It's coming out next year, right?
Yes,
Old Guard
it
2?
is.
I think so.
Okay.
I'm so excited, but I do think you're correct, especially with all the flashbacks that could have happened, because there's so much more story there. Little gaps, but not too crazy.
And if you wanted to kill off Cameron Diaz, Charlize Theron's character in Old Guard 2, right? You could very easily do a prequel series about how she's been a warrior across time, really. I mean, so yeah, it would be very easily done. It's weird that it's taken quite this long, and I guess I know that she was that Gina was making this, and then and then she's just going to be a producer on The Old Guard too. She won't be making it, but
but still women directed,
right?
Black woman director, who was the second unit director on one of the Star Wars. Last Jedi, I think
she was Rian Johnson's kind of protege.
Yeah, the good one, the good Star Wars.
The one that everyone was up in arms about.
Yeah, because they're idiots. Sorry, and we have to play to fan service to everything. Are you not a Last Jedi?
No. The only thing I didn't really care about Last Jedi was the Carrie Fisher Superman pose. That was kind of lost me a little bit. But
stupid.
I'm not gonna lie. Star Wars. I'm slowly but surely. About 4 Thanksgivings ago, I knocked out all the Lord of the Rings in one day, and it was fun. It was
director's cuts or theatrical cuts.
Directors.
Oh wow! Look at you.
Yes, it was a group of friends.
Okay, I was gonna say it's a strange commitment.
It was our Friendsgiving kind of thing.
So none of you wanted to talk to each other, so you just put a movie on, and so like all day long, I was like, you know what, we can't speak through this.
I like the idea of Devin going like, "Who's that guy?"
Wait, a lot of that.
Wait, who's that other short guy? What about him? Why are their feet so hairy?
A lot of that. It was actually, I have said, I wish we would have set up a camera because none of us are as close. Kind of pop friends. It was 7 years ago, and I just the time lapse of who came, who left, who napped, who didn't, who danced, who played, who actually watched the movie, kind of thing. And that's what I want to do with like Star Wars. But the thing is, kind of like Marvel, it's gotten it's not a day, it's a month.
You're losing time at this point. Yeah.
that you'll never get back by going to watch those films and series and
because it's like everything now, right?
It's a lot like
series,
Marvel, where everything's kind of intertwined.
Victoria Mahoney is who's directing Old Guard 2.
It's just like second unit director.
It was second unit,
and I think from the Old Guard 2. Those of us who watched Kill Bill and were like, gosh, I wish I got more of Lucy Liu's world, you're going to kind of see that show up in Old Guard 2.
Oh,
right.
Okay, cool.
Yes, yes. I went down a deep web when I first came out, and then again when I rewatched it for a conversation. Introduced my grandparents to it; they loved it. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Look at you bridging generations.
They love a good action flick. They agreed with you on Red Notice to the extent that they got up and went to bed.
No, that was one.
Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah, there were. Well, and again, I have this. Brock and I talked last night about how he has finally been able to put down a book that he doesn't like. I have not been able to do that successfully with movies so much.
Okay.
It's for Red Notice. I had to watch. It was like 3 or 4 times where I had to even get through it, and then eventually you just kind of put it aside.
God.
Oh, you powered through.
Yeah, but I have long gone in this
for movies.
This book sucks. And I was movies probably around the same time too, where I'm like, I'm not watching this anymore. This
Interesting.
is awful.
Maybe because astrology pin, I'm all air signs. I had no qualms about ever being like, I don't like this. This doesn't work for me. Bye.
I'm a water sign. I don't know what that means, but I am
It
a water
exactly
sign.
what.
Okay, then all right.
You went back to Red Notice 4 times. That's what that means.
I have no idea what's going on right now.
This is what this podcast has become at this
Yes,
point.
this is what happens when you invite
It's
me.
not
Sorry.
that I'm not having a good time. I just don't know. But I have been in a lot of places having a good time and having no idea why I was having a good time. So
it happens. It happens.
and then I quit drinking, and that doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
I just have shitty time everywhere I go.
Good time.
But you now know and have the skill set to walk away.
This is true. Yes,
Baby
this
steps.
is what
Yeah, all right. No.
baby steps. Okay, can we get back to
the
the Woman
sorry.
King, please? No,
Sure, why not?
I'm kidding. I don't
What
really
were
care. I just wanted to.
you were talking about the athleticism and the fights, which were, although fight scenes were amazing. Truly favorite grit scene though was her going through those thorn bushes or whatever they're called. That
During her final test to become one of the
Yes.
I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure what that test was trying to accomplish.
I don't.
Other than just
that
toughness.
you can
yeah.
finish it.
Right.
Just that you can finish it. I think that was all it was, right?
At the end of the day, that
it looked
you
cool.
will not give up.
But also it set up something that I want to talk about. I want to nitpick, but I want to go back to this idea about the action scenes too, because I thought, compare those to the scenes in the Old Guard, which was slicker, more spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
These felt a lot more real. They also felt like there was more at stake, I think, in them.
Oh,
Where the
yes.
Old Guard, yes, they're immortal, but and it was more kind of like, oh, this is just a really cool fight scene and people moving and the way
At
the
what
camera
point will
moved.
they wake back up?
Right.
kind of thing.
This felt more real.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a point where I turned to Shasta and was like, hey, shout out to Shasta and Art Tooth. And was like, I am having flashbacks to Battle of the Bastards right here. Game of Thrones, clutching, what is happening? This is very real to me.
I didn't say this. This is a Game of Thrones safe space. We don't.
Okay. So y'all still haven't recovered from the last season burn? Never? You never watched it?
So I think I watched half of the last season, and I was like, I'm so glad I didn't watch any more of this.
No, now, okay. Because I held out forever. I didn't come in until the 4th season and was truly just reading the scripts up until then, or the balancing back and forth for that, the books. I get it. You guys stand your ground on something. I understand. Not even going to go back to House of the Dragons?
No.
Okay.
Brock just sits in his home and just angry and stewing most of the time. Just
And
looking out. He's looking out at the window and yelling at the sky for
With a cup of
just
coffee
for
and a
being
dog.
thing.
cup of coffee and my dog.
Yes.
And typically a book.
Are you also no Game of Thrones?
No. I have not watched House of the Dragon. I was pretty much put off by the last season, and also just
Same.
all of the rhetoric around that. That was just tiring.
It's
Right?
just bad storytelling.
Yes.
Well, not only
It's
that,
just
but
bad fucking storytelling.
but just it gets exhausting. Of it was bad. The last season was bad, and then you just can't stop reading things about it and hearing things about it.
Same.
It's interesting how that whole series, how well revered it was at the beginning, and then just kind of fell off the cliff. We still talk about The Sopranos and The Wire and Breaking Bad,
Exactly.
these TV series that were just, and it seems like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is like Avatar, where just no one speaks about Avatar anymore. I mean, they will soon. And again, I never count out James Cameron for anything. I don't think he's a great filmmaker. I think he's I think he's a very technically great filmmaker. I don't think he's a good storyteller.
Right.
But I never like every time he comes up with something and he's going to spend $800 billion on a movie, then he'll just make it back. It won't matter because he's sold his soul to the devil at some point. So it has to be. So I haven't gotten into House of the Dragon as of yet. I have watched a couple episodes because when I was in Italy, it was the only show that was on that was in English. So I watched like one of the episodes where they go to a sex dungeon or something. So
I've heard of this episode.
And then, and so I watched it like 5 times because again, it was the only show in Italy that I could see.
You're done. You watched the season technically.
Right. So I saw the sex dungeon scene. So that was pretty cool. And it has a lot of that same feel. It's one of those things like once I have kind of divorced myself from a genre or from a particular type of show, I find it hard to jump back into.
Same.
And so, like, I don't go back. I haven't watched Rings of Power or Ring of Power, and I haven't watched. Once the Hobbit movies were so terribly done, then it was just
done. Okay.
Yeah, I was kind of out of it.
Okay. Okay, I understand that too. Last season, I think it's a great example of when Hollywood meets a storyteller, because George R.R. Martin is a good storyteller. He knows how to take history and weave it to meet the reader. But I think that your writers were just not, which is not what we saw in The Woman King. Although I think y'all maybe had some opinions on plot or things.
Well, I want to go back to the battle. You wanted to battle scene.
Yeah. So looking at it from I'm sorry, what did I say?
I said I'm moving too quick.
Oh, no, you're fine.
She's bringing us back.
We tend to be long-winded.
This is...
So going from the Old Guard to The Woman King, the Old Guard was clearly rated R. There was a lot more blood. The one thing that I noticed and I didn't know about until after I saw the movie was that it seemed like a lot of the battle scenes, while they were epic, they were more subdued than what you would normally see in a movie like this. Yep. From a CGI perspective or just a matter of, just of scale. But I think, going back and understanding that when they were filming these scenes in South Africa, that the Omicron was hitting and that she basically was kind of handcuffed. She couldn't make the film that was really on paper. And so she had to, so I think when you see those scenes, a lot of the battle scenes are done in fog and a lot of smoke with the whole
and dust being kicked up.
The whole gunpowder in the explosion scenes. I think a lot of that was done out of necessity to the one to the rating, trying to get PG-13 and get people into the theaters to see it, and then also she was just not able to make the film that she initially set out to make.
I wonder what that's like from the perspective of a director of something so out of your control, having such control over your vision. As a viewer, I actually was like, oh, this is interesting because I'm so used to seeing battle scenes from the West perspective, that seeing it from this perspective, this is really cool. This is different for me. I like it.
Yeah, and I like that they were smaller on scale.
Yes.
Because I don't imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't imagine that these tribal battles were giant battlefield affairs. I imagine that they were sort of pockets of groups going after other pockets of groups, and that's what I saw on screen, and so I really like that.
Right, that makes sense because thinking historically, we know that it really was so many different tribes, and it's not going to be mass cities, mass societies kind of thing,
right?
Yeah,
and I think from a director's standpoint, it's probably one of those things where you're never ever truly done with an art project, right? You're always looking for ways. I think you can be happy with the end result, but you clearly have some sort of deadline that has to be to cut off. And I'm sure that she had years and years and years to work on this. You can see it with George Lucas and the Star Wars stuff. You would never stop tinkering if you didn't move on to the next project.
Yeah, Jerry Stoltz, the art critic, said that you're not done with a piece of art until it leaves your hands, right? Whether that you turn it into the studio, right? You turn it into an editor, right? You hang it on a gallery wall, or someone buys it from you, right? You're still always working on it in one way or another. Yeah. Okay, so this film is set in 1820s in the Kingdom of Dahomey, which is present-day Benin, which is West Africa, and it's under the curve. It's in the, I don't know what to call that.
I know what it's one of the key places for trade with Portugal and everything.
The film centers on this regiment of all-female warriors, the Agoge. Is it a Goje or is it a Goy? Is it?
I may have said it wrong.
No,
earlier.
I don't
Actually, so in reading and writing, I have been saying, say what you said, bro.
know. A Goje?
A Goje. But I've heard how you said it.
A Goye,
Jason.
which is a
Yes. And I think even in the film, they do the switch up of, depending on where you're coming from, you've said it differently.
Interesting.
Okay.
Because I've heard both, and I know that even in like learning about them, I've heard professors say different things too.
Well, most of us professors are wrong half the time.
I mean,
anyway, so.
it was like the argument that when the first trailer dropped for this, people were like, those accents, and someone was like, we're never going to be historically accurate. Just so you understand that.
Right. Well, and that's a bigger point of the film is this, or some of the discourse around the film is the historical accuracy. Let me just read the summary real fast, just so I think
please.
we're like, because in my head I keep wanting to do it anyway. Okay, so the film is set in 1820s Dahomey, which is a West African kingdom state at this time. It centers around the Agoje and General Naniska, played by Viola Davis, as she trains the next generation of fighters. And among them is Nawi, a girl who's been offered to the king and the Agoje by her father. Her father tries to marry her off, and she's just not having it with anyone. Nawi forms a bond with Agoze, who is played by Lashana Lynch. She's kind of like a drill sergeant type? Would that be fair?
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
But although she's much more friendly than your typical, I mean, she kind of takes her under her wing, and is much more encouraging to her.
Yeah, more of a mentor at that point as well.
Yeah, she's not like Arlie Ermy or anything like that.
No, there's no Full Metal Jacket moment, no Vincent D'Onofrio moment in this film. But Nawi and Naniska butt heads the entire time. So yeah, they're antagonistic toward each other. This whole time, Dahomey, the Agoje, are battling the Oyo, who they're actually a tributary kingdom to. The Oyo was a bigger kind of empire.
Right.
For those at home, if you've seen Bug's Life, it's very much like that.
Yeah.
Where the ants have to give it up to the crickets.
So this is where I was going to go. I was going to sort of talk about this film through a critical lens of A Bug's Life.
Good.
But you beat me to
Wonderful lessons.
But you beat me to
Solid animation.
You beat me to it. So they're battling the Oyo. They're also battling white slave traders.
Right.
They are battling the traditions in the Dahomey Kingdom. So this fighting is being done by this particular group of women. The Dahomey Kingdom, along with other tribes, would go on war raids and capture people from other tribes to then sell into the slave trade. The Agoge are like, this needs to stop. And the king at the time, played by John Boyega, King Gezo, was like, well, at least we don't sell our own people anymore.
Right.
So they're fighting that too. Naniska wants to move towards production of palm oil as an economic stability rather than the slave trade.
You've got what the Portuguese, whose mother, who was part Dahomey.
Well, we've got this Portuguese slave trader and his friend Malik, whose mother was Dahomey. So Malik is half Dahomey, and he's there to visit his homeland. He gets the hots for Nawi, and this comes up later. But the big thing there is that this slave trader is pressuring Gezo, pressuring Boyega to remain in the slave trade.
Right.
And he's like, look, one, it's made you rich. Two, I can't offer you protection if you don't do this. And this brings up part of this question of why they're in the slave trade to begin with, because this is economic feasibility. This is the economy of the time, which I don't think we in the West understand how that's
unless
working.
you had Miss Goodman as a teacher. Unless you had me as a teacher, because we talk about this. It is very important, but it's not. I know where you're going with this, so I'll let you finish your summary. The controversy, right? Or the conversation, the dynamic of people wanting more out of that.
But I don't think we need more of that in the film. I don't know. What do you? Because they bring it up. It's there. It's always there. Right. But it doesn't have to be picked apart. It becomes part of the political intrigue in the film between Naniska and one of King Gezo's wives.
Correct.
But it doesn't have to be, again, like this didactic moment of pulling it apart.
Yeah, I think the argument and the this back, however you want to characterize it, if it's backlash or not, to kind of point out these historical inaccuracies. The only person that is real in this movie is Boyaga's character, the king, right? Everyone else is just a fictional character.
Correct.
I knew about it going in, but again, then seeing it, I think it presented it as well as it could. I don't necessarily know if the Agojé were truly adamantly against the slave trade.
This is true. This is true. There was a scholar that wrote about the kingdom of Dahomey, and so this is some of the stuff that he brings up. The idea that they were pushing to end this type of slave trade. They were pushing to move to palm oil production as well. So that part is true. And Gezo as well had stopped selling his own people, his own tribe members into slavery, but his brother before him had been doing that. So that stuff is historically accurate.
I never felt that the film actually presented itself as some sort of end-all be-all factual basis of what we're seeing here, where a lot of other films have done that. And I mean, again, I think a lot of the online chatter is obviously done in bad faith. You see it with you see it. You saw it with Hamilton. You see it with a bunch of other pieces like this. It doesn't. It's just made to detract. It's just and that's the only reason that it's there, is to play this whataboutism that is nonsense to the storyline that's actually being presented. But at no point does the story then say this is true and all these things are happened and it's all fact. It never, even at the end. This is a fictional story of a place that actually existed and one person that actually existed and then people that were like the ones that we're seeing. But again, that story's been told over and over and over again. Not necessarily this particular story, but but these types of stories have been told over and over again. And we don't pick them apart like this. You're just looking for a reason to pick this apart.
That's what I kind of thought was. You had to say something. You felt like you had to be a critic about it. Here's what you'll go into. This film is not claiming to be your history teacher. It truly is wanting to bring in the story of the lives of these people and that everyday lives. And we got what influences that from this film, but we didn't need to go into all the historical. And I actually think that they did a really good job of closing the circles on a lot of the storylines. There might be some that kind of were left gaps, but overall, truly the only question I walked away with, which I would have loved to know, is how the healer, her tall friend that you've already told me the name of,
Enzima?
Yes, and the general, how they became so close over time, and because they had a bond that was truly unbreakable. And that was truly my only, I would have loved to know that story. Everything else, I thought that she did really well of, good, I see this, I'm done. There will not be a sequel, and I'm okay with that kind of thing. Yeah. But I think it comes down to, somebody said, some editor in some room was like, it can't be all good. Find something. Right. And then somebody wrote a think piece, and my goodness, here we are.
And it's just a bunch of online trolls, too.
Right.
And it's the same people screaming about CRT, or critical race theory, because they don't fucking know what critical race theory is. Anyways, and...
No, I was going to say, which is why I actually find it so disappointing, is because I do think it started in one area as such a critique because, we don't want this. And now I'm seeing Black and Indigenous and Latino writers and film critics pick up on it. And it's like, y'all, that wasn't her goal when she set out to make this. No. That wasn't anyone's goal when they were like, how do we want to make this? Who do we want to highlight? It was, we want to highlight the possibility of these powerful women and that they did exist.
Well, and it starts the conversation, right? It doesn't have to be this, again, it doesn't have to be a full portrait. This movie shows you so many different things about just African society, showing how an environment that has been portrayed as backwards and violent and poor and and again, because it's become kind of the de facto bad guy when it's safe to have a certain bad guy, where, in the 70s it was just, urban people were, and you had all these cops and things like, and talking like Robert Townsend's Hollywood Shuffle, where black men can only play pimps. And so you move from that when it becomes passe to do that and not accept it. And then you move on to the Middle Eastern, which you saw in the 90s and early 2000s. And then that moves over to kind of these generic bad guys. But again, going back to this shows you a society that was progressive.
Right.
The king had women on his council. He had eunuchs on his council. Whether those people were actually homosexual or not doesn't really even really matter.
Right.
But this shows you, and again, it's
they weren't sneaking in the shadows.
Right, absolutely. These were people that he trusted, and so this it shines a light on this idea that 2022 that we are the most progressive that societies have ever been, or that this exceptionalism of Western culture is where this is the pinnacle of of human evolution, which is clearly not the case, right?
And we suck.
And you see that, and again, it's disappointing, and we have to keep going back to it over and over again, and hopefully, but I hope that we keep presenting these things, because eventually these trolls will hopefully get tired and move on to something else, because you're seeing it with House of the Dragon as well, and you see it with Rings of Power as well, where you have these people of color in these roles, and everybody, well, trolls can't be like, fuck you, come on, these things don't actually exist. And again, it's just,
we saw it with Star Wars too,
right? Sure,
we can't have an Asian woman, Asian American or Boyega or a black man playing this. I think that the Woman King does a better job of any other film of reckoning with an aspect of a kingdom, country, continent's history than anything that's been produced in this country about
for sure
slavery or racism.
Largely because you didn't have the white saviorism playing. Right. It truly was that human conversation. The what is best for our king. Like, you got to see it from different levels of how it all was being approached. Why? Which goes back to what you said, the economy. Right. Like, at the end of the day, society's changing. We're going to have to, but how do we navigate in this? And I think that is really what made the difference of the reality of it, honestly.
Right. And a big part of this movie is you need to listen to women. We chuckle, but I think that's a real thing. I think that something about this film is that at the end of the day, the king, a man, is going to make this final decree, but he's getting it from a woman. Right. And I think that's Prince-Bythewood understanding that the patriarchy still is reigning in this Western world. And it's still, you can't ignore it however much you want to destroy it. It's still there. But she can show that, you know what? The real fucking ideas are coming from over here. Yeah. And you need to listen to women when they're speaking up, and when they're speaking so powerfully. Well, and her internal struggle as well, because, I mean, she has that internal battle the entire time. Obviously, she comes from a place of great tragedy and horror that happened to her. Right. So she has to give up, spoiler alert, has to give up her daughter, but then also has to struggle with this idea of one being a stoic leader for her troops, and then also balancing it out with leave no person behind, and then going against her own king when that's on the line. That whole struggle of her whole journey through this film, even though she kind of maintains this brave face and kind of stoic face throughout all of it, is, I mean, can we just say Viola Davis fucking kicks ass in this movie. She's so good. And you know what? Her eye work, the acting she does with just her eyes and face is incredible. I have never seen someone look so kind of world weary in a role and do it so well.
I mean, I was like, she is tired, y'all. Like, bone tired. Her soul is ready to lay down, and she conveyed that well. I every single person, again, I was like, gosh, everybody was made for this part, including even just going off to the wife who kept contradicting her.
Yeah, she was fantastic.
Played that well.
Oh, no, everybody. Lashana Lynch was amazing.
Yes. I love her, actually. My gosh. I've been following her since Starcrossed. Shout out to We Tried to Do Romeo and Juliet. But again, kind of showing what you were kind of talking about with this thing in Hollywood where we'll just drop a bunch of people who are diverse into something that is traditionally a story everybody can relate to, and that's creating even more of an issue because it's not inclusive and it's just not done intentionally, like we saw here, where every single, because I didn't read a synopsis before, I just was like, Viola Davis, isn't it cool? Right. And I was very surprised by every element, the daughter, but also the young man. I was like, I love that part that they brought this young man in to show just the the generational trauma of the slave trade, but also this reckoning that a lot of, because you really did have so much interrelationships occurring, and people who were put in different places, especially in places of caste systems. So he was going to have that, navigate that, but also, again, to show time is changing. They would not have 50 years before interacted with somebody like him.
Sure.
Kind of thing.
Okay. We've touched on it a couple times, but I want to talk about Viola Davis giving up her child.
Oh, yeah.
Not in real life, in the movie.
Yeah.
So,
to clarify.
So we
breaking
get,
news.
We get
we
this
have found Viola Davis's child.
This is what this podcast was created for in the first place. We get this moment of recognition between her and Oba, who's this Oyo general, this kind of a big bad in the film. And we learn that earlier in her life, Viola Davis was captured and held captive by Oba and others, and repeatedly abused, repeatedly raped. Yes. She escaped, later found out she was pregnant, and then she had to get rid of that child. She asked her friend to get rid of him. She gives it to some missionaries or people passing by, and that's it. Then we see Nawi going through this final test, crawling through the thorns, and having to have those thorns pulled out, and Viola Davis is like, make sure you get all of these and put oil on these scars, and even this one, which turns out was a place that Viola Davis put a piece of a shark tooth under the skin of her baby that she gave away, and then Nawi.
That's what hospitals do, right? When you give up your baby, they put something.
It's a marker.
You have to choose.
It's like a microchip for your dog.
They give you like a thing to choose from, like a different type of trinket, and make sure you choose the right one, and then they put it in your baby's shoulder, just in case.
Both of you are like, why this?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. It comes out of nowhere. That's what bugs me, is that it just like comes out of all of a sudden you see this thing like, oh, this has to be the child that I put this shark tooth thing. But we get from a storytelling standpoint, we get no inclination this is coming. I
definitely already.
This is a very much like, Deus Ex Machina moment. It's like, how do we solve this? Here, I'll pick this up and I'll put it over here, and now it's fixed. We find out that Nawi was adopted. She says, "Oh, I was adopted," but she says it like right then. All we had to have was her father, her adoptive father, saying, "You'll never marry any of these men. I don't know why I adopted you in the first place." And I would have been like, "Oh, okay. I'm waiting for this to happen now." But there's no indication. There's no kind of. I mean, yes, from a Hollywood storytelling standpoint, you understand that's going to happen.
That made me know that it was going to happen. But this is interesting. Finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just think it's sort of like a cheap trick where none of the work is done beforehand to let us know that this is coming.
Oh.
Or to even look back and go, oh, I see where the hints were, or because all we see is the two of them like butting heads. And I get it, but also she didn't have to be her daughter for them to form a kind of close bond.
Interesting. I want to hear your thoughts before I share mine.
No. So mine are going to be outside of the film. So let me hear yours first, and then I'll give you the reason why this is in the story afterwards. But
Okay. So I thought of it in the sense of why I thought the love story was in there too, right? A love story to Black women, of the sense that, especially in modern society, we can't be mothers, powerful, and lovers. And we knew from the beginning that you could not be one of these women and have a family, have a child, that's what really leads back. And we have this person who's having this reckoning, and we see it kind of in the mentor relationship of the necessity for, you are working so hard for this kingdom to survive and to have this relationship with your king. And you see in this young girl, this next generation of possible, this is you. And even in those moments where she kept saying, you don't know my life story, you don't really know me, you're not taking the time to get to know me, that's because she's become so hardened to all the things that make her a good general, which is that maternalistic, that caregiver, the sage, the things that, especially in Western society, have, put women in the kitchen, pregnant, and history's just a bag of dicks kind of thing. And so you don't have that here. And that's why I was told, Shasta and I both were like, we knew this. We're glad that they solved it. We just didn't like the timing of it, if that makes sense.
Well, and I think that we can agree on that aspect, that the timing, just didn't work. I wonder, and that makes perfect sense, especially from more of like a sociological standpoint as well, of what I think, or even a phenomenological experiential lens. That what I
love when you use big words like
that. Of what you're bringing to the film versus what I'm bringing to the film, which is clearly different, right? And I'm talking about it from like a nuts and bolts kind of like, well, this is storytelling, and you're bringing that other aspect, which is fantastic. And I wonder though, like, would it have been even stronger if they still formed this connection, but it wasn't her daughter? Nanisca, Viola Davis, understanding that what makes her good is this maternal instinct, but that doesn't have to mean that anyone is her daughter.
I could see what you're saying, and yet I think there is such, in the Black community, the dynamic of Black moms and Black daughters is, to quote Maya Angelou, to describe my mother is to describe the eye of a tornado. And that's how I talk about my mom. I love her, but we are truly nothing but a hurricane. And largely, a lot of that has to do with societal expectations, generational trauma that we're both working on. And you see that across. And so that's why I think she did the physicality. Do I think that it's possible and that it was probably already there, and the drill sergeant that became the mentor? We know that Viola Davis's character has already done this mentorship and this maternalistic thing. You see it in the community she's created. So that's why I say I think that's why it became so, this is my child. And even with the tooth, even though I'm like, the timing of it, the tooth, I definitely look at it as a, like, it's the thing of, again, going back to my personal relationship. Up until I'm 34, up until maybe 2 years ago, my mother always said, my Devon. I belong to her. I am hers. And that is very much a Black mom, Black daughter thing, is at the end of the day, you are mine, child of my womb kind of thing. So that's why. But I see what you're saying, and I think we agree with, again, the just like, how would this, there are other ways it could have unfolded. Because I do say, I was like, oh, I already know that this is your daughter, by the way this is going down. But why, there were moments where I was like, this is just anticlimactic kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you guys are both wrong, but that's fine.
Okay.
Wow. One, I think
there's only three of us in here, and two of us agree, and one doesn't. So I know this isn't a fucking democracy. No, clearly, by the way I'm talking.
I mean, I think the message that we should be taking away from this is that when you give your daughter up, you make sure that you give her up, and your number two gives her up and puts her far, far away,
and that she never comes back to find.
Right.
We've all read Oedipus.
Things come in to haunt you. Yes.
Right. We all know that. Right? Yeah. You make sure that kid goes away.
Right. Because it's like a league of her own kind of scenario where your little sister's actually going to end up playing against the team that you play against, and she's going to win the championship because you're going to feel like you have to give it up, right?
Guilt.
That's what inspired them.
Guilt.
So, but I think that it wouldn't. I agree with you, Devin. I don't think it would have been as powerful if it wasn't that mother-daughter relationship wasn't there. I do believe that it is kind of a Hollywoodization of the story.
Yes.
But I think it adds such an emotional throughput because at that point, if that's not there, then Viola Davis's character is just a general, and yes, she has a bunch of daughters, but she has no real. I think it adds a layer to the story that brings an emotional gravitas back and kind of and adds a level that gives, especially the female. And again, I hope I'm not like dismissive when I say that, but like the female audience,
right? Yeah,
an emotional bond to the film,
right?
And this is a throughput through in Gina's movies as well. So she was an adopted kid. So this is pretty.
This explains a lot about Old Guard.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. So that whole mother-daughter kind of scenario in Old Guard is where as well.
And you see the mother-daughter dynamic in Love and Basketball.
Oh right. Yes, very much. You're correct.
So this clearly is, and again, why you can see that this is made from a female perspective is that the movie, had it been made by a male director, would have ended on she's the woman king and roll credits cut to black. But then you have another scene where they're mourning their dead and they're speaking to them. That sensibility is all Gina. And I think, again, so to that point of I have a tendency to be jaded in a lot of senses in regards to those types of, but I think it all played really, really well. And what I see over and through her films, just in general, is like Love and Basketball is not a film that was made for me at all, but I can see how it's just so well done. It's so well put together. The story,
it's a black classic. Yes.
It's right,
but it's also a classic of somebody like me who played basketball all the time growing up, and the soundtrack in that film was like the soundtrack to my 6th or 7th grade. I mean, this was stuff that when Digital Underground came on at that party, I was like, I was singing along to Shock G, R.I.P. right, Shock G's verses, and then switching over to Money B. I mean, I knew all this stuff because that's what I was into. So no, it's not for quote unquote us, but just like this, and this is I love the tension that like the daughter brings to the film. I think that's great. I just have a problem with how he got there.
And let me clarify, I don't mean like white male audiences. That's not what I'm saying at all. It was just the time that
a non-basketball playing
person who's never been in love.
At the time, who was going to watch it? Who was like, oh, I'm excited for Sanaa Lathan to have another movie come out.
Right.
It was a very specific audience. I get that's what you're saying.
Well, and again, I'm just just not typically a rom-com fan. Although
Did you call it a rom-com?
It is.
Yeah, it's a romantic.
Love and Basketball.
I wouldn't say necessarily. It's
a rom-com.
Yeah,
it's considered in like black film genre, right? Love and Basketball, Love Jones, and Thin Line Between Love and Hate.
Sure, no, I get the rom part, but
the comedy.
I didn't find Love and Basketball that.
It's lighthearted.
Funny.
It's not necessarily.
No, it's lighthearted, but I mean, I guess I think of a specific thing when I think of rom-com, and this is not what I sort of like put into. So romantic, yes, but I mean, I still think it's a drama more than a comedy.
Coming of age.
Yeah, definitely a coming of age. A Bill Dungerman, right? I mean, it's these two people growing up, and I just
interesting because I'm gonna lie, we watched it together. I had a lot of laugh out loud.
I mean, I had a lot of fun. I loved watching that movie. I have a good time watching it. I'm just not. I'm not laughing in that way.
Can you give me your definition of like an example of a rom-com? I'm very interested now. Also, because do you watch rom-coms?
No, I don't. But I mean, I guess I can
show us your Sandy B tattoo.
I think it's a term that's left over from back when you had the actual rom-coms. Like you had the it's the one. Rock Hudson and Doris Day, right? All of their little films that they did together. Pillow Talk. Mm-hmm. And then you would still technically classify Julia Roberts, anything she's done as a rom-com, but it's actually not that funny. So maybe that's what it is.
But like My Best Friend's Wedding is a rom-com. God, almost anything besides In the Cut. I mean, Harry Met Sally's. When Harry Met Sally is sort of, I think what we end up is sort of what the apotheosis of rom-com. But yeah, I don't really watch those. I mean, Kate and Leopold. That's a joke. That's a shitty movie.
I was gonna say. Did you watch that?
No. I mean, I think I tried. I had a girlfriend in high school who loved rom-coms, and I just got stuck watching that shit.
Gotcha.
But
The Woman King was not a rom-com.
No, absolutely not.
But I do see what you're saying. Of like, I like that thread actually. I like when I go back to a director and I can see the connections. Mm-hmm. So that definitely deepens the understanding for me. And I get it hits different, right? Everything can be for everyone, but it is going to interact with each individual differently, kind of thing. I like that though, and also I was gonna say the ending with the ancestral, and I also think that was part of the reason why I had to be her daughter, physically her daughter, biologically her daughter, because we noticed that the time where we're starting to be like, oh yeah, this is probably her daughter, or something's up with this young girl that's come, is when she's doing her prayers to the ancestors. And I think that's another thing that the director's kind of trying to sink in, is that reminder, right, of culturally, she is that young lady's ancestor. She might not recognize it yet,
right?
But that blood is calling right now. And then you see at the end, that's when they really have their moment. But I did love the like, "Will you dance with me, mom?" kind of thing.
Yeah,
or mama.
yeah. And I said, I think, you know, and going with my wife, that was one of the things where like kind of like, and she's not as steeped in just watching everything that ever comes out. So she, like, again, I get jaded by certain things, and you can see things coming down Main Street a mile away.
Right.
But this sounds dismissive, but for your average moviegoer, for that type of emotional beat to be there, I think plays really well. And I didn't think it was it too heavy handed? I don't know. I think you get kind of lost in the moment, and it doesn't, I mean,
I can see what you're saying.
I think the other thread, going back to, I'm interested because you said you liked the love story. One of the things that Brock and I didn't care for, and again, was because that to me was the shoehorned element of the story.
Right.
Was this, and I understand.
It's like studio notes.
Well, I understand from a perspective of the character development, where this girl, if there is a sequel to this story, then it's her story, right?
Right.
And her then trying to transform the Agoge to be something a little bit more modern, a little bit less repressive.
Oh.
Where, and again, I don't know if historically that's probably not at all the case.
No, but I get what
but fictionally, what I would do if I'm writing the story is taking the Agoge to the next level, where they then can become actual mothers, and they can become, they can expand upon their lives that are just stuck in this kind of male-dominated world, in a male-dominated construct of being these soldiers first who can't be seen as anything else. And so I understand from a storytelling perspective. I just didn't feel like, in the sense of the movie, and again, tacking on an additional 15 minutes, if I was going to cut it, that would have been the emotional thread that I would have cut.
Gotta go.
One, because I didn't really feel like his character was that great. I didn't feel like the friend.
I thought it was the actor.
Yeah, it could have been, for sure.
For me,
I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think he's meant to sort of stand in or represent a kind of guilt or a kind of different kind of conscientious. He's coming back, and he's coming back with a slave trader.
Oh, I didn't think guilt. I thought, again, that like ancestral, blood has been calling him home kind
but
of
also
thing.
He's like literally involved.
Right.
And then he comes back and he's sort of looking around and you're like, and then by the end of it, he's like, wait, yes, this is all bad. and I'm going to give up this like white guy to get killed by these slaves we just freed.
I think it's that mindset. Well, one, we have the perspective of, and he did have it, right? He understood that like what you think you're sending them to is not what they're going to, kind of thing,
right.
Especially in Portugal. But I think for him, that is the sheltered, right? Just life. That's what I kind of gathered from him as a character. For me, the lackluster was the actor. No shade, sir, it wasn't it. The minute though that they were walking and he wandered on off into the water, I was like, oh Lord, here comes the love story.
Right.
But again, like you can just see it coming, and I think you just wonder like, why what is this adding? What kind of texture is this adding here?
I saw it as the fact, like what I said,
right.
The lover, and I don't think that in the next generation she would be more progressive. I think she would honor the code because she chose, and she chose her family. I think it had to be an outsider because everybody knew, right? They don't marry. So there's not going to be some man in the village who's going to be foolish enough to fall in love with one of them. And not somebody in the castle, not one of the other male warriors. It had to be an outsider who was just dumb enough. And bless his heart, it was him.
He's so pretty but stupid.
Yeah.
Right?
He really thought he was going to get a kiss kind of thing.
I think this is a really interesting aspect of these women, that they can't marry, they can't have or seem to have any kind of romantic or sexual relationship with a man. And I wonder if that is repressive, or if it's them saying we don't need this. We occupy a place of privilege in this society. We have the king's ear, at least those of us of a higher echelon, and we don't need any of this. We can be strong. We can be independent. We can be respected without that kind of construct of having a male partner. Yeah. I also, and we talked about this last time with Let the Right One In, I also wonder about how this works with kind of a queering of the narrative too. Like, what is this saying about, like, no, we, because you can read into this that any kind of sexual relationship happens then in between them, and this would set them apart even further as others in a sort of heteronormative, society. No matter how progressive it's sort of displayed or portrayed on the screen.
I don't know. I probably went first of all, right? We know that gender and queer roles were very much a Western. And the way that I thought of it was these are your sisters, but there's a possibility, but it's not also norm. Also, like, I don't know. They did not sell the believability to me that these women were not finding somebody in the bushes. Whatever. Right. Like, it might have been quiet, but it was happening.
But even that somebody in the bushes was that between themselves? I
think so. I think it was everybody. I think it was just the fact that I took it from a different perspective of you can't have anything that would make you care beyond the king's biddings, beyond you are for and always this community, and that is at the end, that is your center, that is your whole thing that consumes you. And if you have somebody that you're married to, they can easily be kidnapped and used against you. If you have a family, if you have a child, we saw the dynamic of her with a child. It became where she'd been working for this her whole entire, like, she gave the young girl up so that she could come back and be this role. And then what did she do? She disobeyed the king's orders and went back to get her, because you now have somebody who you care for that can be used against you, but also you're just willing to sacrifice everything for. And I thought that was why the line exists, because at no point did I ever believe, I'm like, no, they probably got all sorts of babies sitting in some missionary places. Just, it is kept quiet kind of thing. But, I don't know.
There's only so many shark teeth to go around.
Yeah.
But they all have their own necklace, so I think they could probably share it between each other.
Terribly unsanitary practice as well. That can't have.
Oddly enough, I really did. I was like, oh.
There wasn't an infection.
Yeah.
I mean, because that shark tooth had, how many battles was that thing?
Right. Yeah. How was she carrying that in? She didn't disinfect that at all.
It wasn't like even just like a. Yeah. No, I really did.
I'm not sure how she even closed the wound afterwards.
Yes. Thought of that too. The little details. I was like, how did your friend come back and not be like, what happened to the baby's arm, kind of thing? Or a missionary not be like,
and no one in her 18 years of life where she's like, what the hell? This is like, I've got like a bone spur chip here.
What's going on here?
Things happen.
Just found me this way. It's just, oh gosh.
What are your thoughts on I
get the kind of Jedi aspect of these, like of the purity of this, and again
are Jedis not allowed to?
No, Jedis can't have sex.
They're like monastic kind of ascetics.
Yeah, they're basically ascetic. They're basically samurai monks essentially.
Okay, interesting.
One of the theories online was that Kenobi was Darth Vader's father at one point, because Kenobi was kind of the Burt Reynolds of Jedi. And probably was young and came around and
Burt Reynolds.
Just you know how the epitome of sexiness is Burt Reynolds.
I mean, there's a whole Golden Girls episode around this, so yeah.
Name me one man in the history of men who's ever been sexier than Burt Reynolds.
No, Paul McDonald Newman doing an impression of Burt Reynolds.
Also, as you're saying this, I'm like, I visualized him coming out of the car. So you're right, but also interesting. No, I was like, my mind is blown in multiple directions, but I really am like, I did not know that about Jedis, and there are a lot of people running around wanting to be Jedis.
Yeah,
so this is very interesting to me.
Yeah, and kids. What's really kind of crazy about all that is kids were then plucked out to be. You had to be identified as a Jedi as a young kid, and so your entire life was spent training and then just going to this religious order that kept you as you were kind of these peacekeepers full-time cops of the entire galaxy.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a hard life.
Also,
which is why you would understand why some of them would go bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that in American society, they definitely are not going good.
Right.
I've seen the complete opposite.
No.
So, okay.
But maybe cops should be aesthetic rather than like being given all this funding.
I firmly believe that. Yeah, Halloween costumes.
So see, to fund the police was just like this call for like monastic asceticism rather than what people thought it was.
Yes, which
that's a lot to unwrap, but sure. Yeah.
I think you're hitting on something though of this trend though across understanding that protectors, I don't know, have to stay pure or something.
Yeah, I definitely like the idea of them having, nothing being used against them. There's no emotional attachment that would allow them to cause them to question what they're doing, even their own vulnerability, their own mortality, where they would just go into battle. And you see it too when they do go into battle, is that there is a brief period of mourning, but they lose their fellow soldiers, and there's not much hand wringing or emotion because that's what they were intended to do.
Oh, you just clicked something for me. That's why they have to go through the thorn bush. But also, that is why it's so important to see her when she goes through to go back for her friend.
Right, because no one else would have done that.
No one's left behind, but we see her then do it again when her mentor is just like defeated. And that one I thought was a really good adding that in for storytelling of seeing this just warrior, fierce woman who the minute that she is, for lack of a better term, conquered, is done. There is no hope, and then we have this young lady who doesn't leave anybody behind.
Well, and her mom doesn't either, right?
Right.
I mean, so it's a nice
despite
tie.
everything she says because there's that one moment where Oba demands 20 Agoge in tribute, and she goes okay, and she counts off him, but then it's this plot, and they all kind of turn in defiance of that order.
I did like that.
Yeah,
it was a cool scene.
That was good.
Yeah.
The one interesting thing about Agoze, the mentor, the drill sergeant.
Right.
We've seen this character in every sort of war movie. I mean, again, you see her in the beginning, and you're like, I know what's going to happen to you at the end. I don't know how, but I know sort of your fate by the end of this movie. No, exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's still
fucking amazing.
Oh, she's so good. LaShawn Lynch is brilliant.
She is a really good actress. Like, I really do. I love that in her youth, she had the opportunity to team up with Viola Davis. And I look forward to them revisiting that in some film sometime later on, like 10 years down the road.
But despite any of these like perceived tropes, they just work. And I think that's any kind of war movie has these characters, no matter how good it is. But the best films, that doesn't get in the way. And that's what. Well, and
it doesn't pop out at you, right? It doesn't take you out of the film like you're going, okay, well, this is a thing that they just shoved in here because this is a storytelling technique that I needed to move from point A to point B. This all seemed, it was just all really so well told and well done that, again, you were just immersed in this to the point. Again, like I said before at the beginning of this, you didn't have to have, you had to crawl at the beginning to kind of set you up, set the stage of where you were, and that was it. And everything else was you are just, it is just presented to you,
right? And
it is this is just another story, just like I said before, like any other story you would have seen told 100 different times,
right?
The only difference is the pigment of skin and the orientation and gender of the people that are fighting. So
and the quality of the storytelling,
right?
Yes. Yeah. I also just realized the point that y'all were really probably over the romance was after her mentor dies and she then goes up to the room and is like resting.
Well, she
know that's not going to be her mindset.
She's saved by this guy.
Yes.
And I didn't need to see that. I didn't need. It just didn't need to be there.
I get that, and how interesting because I saw the other side is the moment when that actual the Portuguese man was like, hey, you could be up here, so you need to stop. Like that statement, I was like, oh, that's also why he's here.
Yeah.
But I could very much see the annoyance of he did end up rescuing someone who we know needs no rescuing. She's just in a moment of vulnerability.
Right.
And we know she would have recovered and then gone right back out there kind of thing.
Yeah, it did seem like a moment of weakness from a character who had not shown really any weakness at all. And again, that's fine.
Right.
It just, but from a perspective of it, where in the heat of the battle, when she's gone through so much at this point, I mean, so because again, if I were looking at that, that love story seems like more of a matter of defiance than more a matter of need.
Yes.
Right. So if she was, I could definitely see her middle of the story talking about where the the exposition was, or where the reveal was made in the movie. That makes sense to me before the big trial, where she goes off and has sex with this guy or has a relationship with this guy, and then realizes that she truly needs to be back with her true purpose, but she also wanted to push back and to find some agency of her own in this kind of mindless vehicle that she's found herself in.
Right. I definitely was like, oh, this teenage rebellion. We do not have time for this right now.
Well, and you see some of that too at the very beginning. When she's talking with her friends, there's not a huge reluctance to get married. It's only when she finds out who she's being promised to that she truly is like, fuck this. I'm not going to sit there and get beaten by this guy for the rest of my life and just be just be his slave, And so she fights back. But when she's talking with her friends, they're all kind of egging her on, and she's kind of smiling demurely and doesn't know what, who she's being betrothed to. Right. But once she finds out, obviously it turns south.
And it's a statement of agency. Right. Yeah. She's saying, like, if someone's going to decide, it's going to be me. Yeah. And I'm not going off with just anyone, especially this dude.
Right. Which, again, for those with the romance, you're like, that person would not make the decision that was made later on to just go to lay down in this nice, comfortable room, knowing, like, she would be very concerned about even what's happening to the body kind of thing.
Right. So we assume that they had relations, right?
Right.
I mean, that she knocked it out.
I think I've made it very clear. None of them are honoring this code.
Because you can make the argument that she didn't, right? That she was just using it as a place to hide and also to recoup. I mean, to recover, right?
Yeah.
Where she's been injured.
She was just in a battle. She just got captured.
Yeah.
Right. She just tried to escape, got beat up again, watched her friend get killed right in front of her because she couldn't run fast enough to keep up. So yes, we could make that argument that I'm choosing to see it that way.
I like it that way. I do. I just, humans.
See, the way that I would have made the movie, though, is then you show her in, like, the mid-credits end scene of her buying a bunch of shark teeth because she's clearly got to give up this daughter for a Women King 2.
I thought we were going to get sort of a musical montage of, like, Take My Breath Away right after that.
Yes, yeah, no, a very Terminator experience, right, where we get some hand clasping.
Yes. And that Top Gun, like, shadow.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Although, speaking of the death, I was really excited to see the healer's response to her best friend outside of the general being killed. The really tall lady, I apologize, but when she got that metal... when she got that metal chain, I was like, somebody is about to die very brutally. And it's only because of the choices you made. The minute she knew that she was dead, I was like, oh, she's about to just unleash. And she did.
Aminza. I keep saying her name wrong. It's Aminza. I'm sorry. Okay. I apologize.
There's a lot of A's happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of vowels in this movie and Dahomey is a hard name for me not to kind of giggle at a little bit. I mean, just because I feel like it's in living color and it's Dahomey the Clown.
That's where I was.
I didn't even think about that.
When you said that, that's exactly what I thought was in living color.
I'm childish. I get that, and I apologize. But yeah, that's Dahomey the Clown is.
Which I feel like there's at least one person on set who made that joke.
Oh, for sure.
For
right.
sure.
Yes.
One person.
It's not actually Damon Wayans, who might have just showed up for some reason.
Hey, I was a lot over, guys. Just wanted to make you giggle because you're kind of doing something serious. Have a good time.
Everyone's being too serious.
Yes.
Which is not a problem.
I've heard their training was like intense. And knowing that she was an athlete, but also her history of just she's very much the body is going to show up how it should kind of thing. I was not surprised, but also when they were going through it, I was like, oh, y'all were dedicated to this. Good job.
No, and they were, and I love, again, like I love that they didn't hide any of these bodies. So, again, Viola Davis is in her 50s. she's not going to be super ripped.
Oh, and you wouldn't have been in this scenario anyway,
exactly,
right? I mean, you wouldn't have been.
But you can see in a lesser film. In a lesser film, they hide things. They don't show the full body. Right? They make sure to cover this. They portray her as younger than she is, and that's what I really appreciate. They didn't do any of that, and she is again like so good at showing the body. Love and Basketball is another one where you believe that that Saint Elesin and Omar Epps can ball a little bit at least. Omar Epps' jumper has some weird mechanics, but
he was trying.
But he is athletic. He can move, and that's important. I think she understands how important that is to the films that she's making.
And I actually even noticed, it's interesting you bring it up, the fact that we got so many full body shots, and the way that what they wore was not to accentuate curves, but because these women were just built, we're going to see actual muscle. We're going to see the strength of them. I told Shasta at the end, I was like, man, fuck colonization, because I would have definitely been one of them. Like, I'm small, I'm stout, I'm quick and muscular. I would have been one of them. And she was like, yeah, actually, I see that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the message to take away from it.
That is it.
Colonization. I could have been the coach.
Yes. Yeah. But my parents went and saw it the same weekend I did, and they were like, it was good. And my dad was like, I didn't know what to expect. I will say, he did agree with y'all. He was like, I don't like the love story. What was the point of that? But definitely they were both like, it was well done. And I think that now there's the turnout for it. Like we saw it with Wakanda, the good turnout. Like this had good turnout and across different types of audiences. It appealed to a lot of people. So I'm excited to see what we start seeing next that are stories that are not focused on this just trauma, but the experience of the people and what they lived kind of thing.
I'm excited to see too because this is not a superhero movie either. And they're pointedly not super heroic in the film. And I would love to see more than just Black Panther and Wakanda Forever depicted.
Yeah, that's true when you think of it. I mean, I think it's that thing, right? Like right now you're just kind of getting Tyler Perry, some Marvel movies, and occasionally one of these that are differentiating. And I thought about it when I saw the trailer response for Wakanda the second. Is it Wakanda Forever?
Wakanda Forever.
Yeah, and the Latino community being like, thank you, specifically Indigenous, Hispanic, like thank you so much for the representation. That we're already seeing in this trailer. And I was like, yeah, because dang, y'all are getting films cut left and right, TV shows. Like, it is really dry out here.
Yeah. Yeah. There's capitalism for you.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, what are you gonna do? I mean, but I agree with you though. Yeah, it's. I think this gets a wide release because of Black Panther. I think because of Suicide Squad to a lesser, which is weird because it's kind of based on.
But I also think because of like Creed.
Sure.
That is, I forget that is, it's not something that's ever appealed to me, but you are right. That has a following. That has been done well. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah,
Creed 3 actually looks pretty good, be honest. I mean, but those movies are so, like, formulaic and perfect. Right. Like, they do that thing so well. Mm-hmm. It's almost impossible, I mean, to not like the Rocky and Creed movies. It's so easy to get caught up in that storyline. And, again, if it's done well and you connect with that character, then all of the little things you're usually willing to forgive.
Yeah. Like Cold War narratives.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, although, like when Rocky IV came out, that was at the height of again, you can make the argument where we are now, but the height of like American exceptionalism and like you said, that Cold War dynamic where we're just coming kind of off of it. But like this idea that, because we're Billy Joel is going over to, and this at the same particular point in time, this turning of the big bad to become this, we're all one. That message is awesome.
If we can get along,
right? Yeah, it's hokey as shit, but it works, man. Look, only time that Rocky didn't work was Rocky V, and that was just because you couldn't think of anything else to do with him. Even Balboa was fine. I mean, like all those movies are fine, but
I think a lot of people came back around. You're right, Balboa. I guess with Creed, first of all, I answer your question. a man better than Burt Reynolds, Michael B. Jordan. But also, I think with it, you're right though. It's got a story to it, but I can't think of anything else as y'all are talking. Like, I'm really over here. Like, there are things that have come out that there's a little here, and I even thought about The Harder They Fall. They came off on Netflix, but they had the same thing, and I think they created the issue, though, which was we're historical, but also we're just going to kind of take a couple of allowances, and so people came out and were like, what in the world is this? We already don't know the stories of these real people, and now you've done this, and so some people were probably already coming into The Woman King prepared to do the same thing.
Sure.
And I wonder about, I mean, it seems to me that I guess many of the black artworks, black film, black TV shows have been more in that realm of TV, something of like Lovecraft country. Of like elevated sort of, quote unquote prestige TV.
But I need to.
And I think there was mixed kind of critical response to that show, and it got canceled after the first season anyway, which I thought was a shame.
But you know why, right?
But, oh no.
Oh, because the second season was if the South won the Civil War.
Really?
And she was going to explore the storyline.
See that, but that would have been
amazing,
interesting.
Yeah, that's what we needed.
Right.
Yeah,
but I think this is, and that's so part of that was exploring these like themes, these actual real deep kind of socioeconomic, like demographic themes. Again, like we Western sort of, I guess, like white capitalist artistic arenas don't want to acknowledge they actually exist.
Have the conversation. Watch the film and then just go and have the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like DeSantis, like being like, I can't believe that we're telling people that America was stolen land. And it's like, well, were people here before? Did you murder them? Probably stolen land, right? But again, like we don't want to have that conversation. Right. So yeah, we're not going to dig into that.
I know. That's actually what brought me to it, and I did want to watch it, and I'm just really scary. So and I know that this is going to be one that like the windows have to be open, the lights have to be on, and it has to be 2:00 in the afternoon for me to watch. But I'm very intrigued by the story, and that like just it's actually a genre that's popping up in books right now in YA, is that going in that time period of the Reconstruction era, Civil War, and moving into that, okay, what does it look like if newly freed people had powers, or they were witches, or they were these things that are already on the outskirts of society anyways. So it fits them, but they're still having to navigate these systems of oppression, and I've very much enjoyed it. I've got like 2 others on my list, and I think that's what she's tapping into, and she really wanted to explore with second season, but HBO just was like, I don't think we can handle the backlash, pretty much, kind of thing.
And we talked about this a lot, and we've been talking about horror movies over the past couple of episodes, and how horror and sci-fi has always been kind of a safe space to kind of branch out and tell these stories, whether they be stories of people of color or stories, queer stories, where they can present them in a fantastical way where you almost are tricked in a sense to not, to be able to kind of open your mind to a different type of story without having to then, for better or worse, overcome the barrier of that's not a movie that again, like from a Tyler Perry perspective of that's clearly not, I guess, just kind of an environment that, or it's storytelling that would communicate necessarily to a different type of audience than what Tyler Perry is trying to accomplish. Right. Aside from the Tom Hanks SNL skit where it's like Black Jeopardy and he's talking about it. But,
that was a good skit.
Should we do recommended if you like?
I want to hear y'all's recommendations first.
Okay,
please.
So we usually go like around.
Okay.
So this is recommended if you like.
Right, and there's no shame here.
There's no like right or wrong answer. This is just kind of us saying to the listener out there that, hey, if you like The Woman King, you might like these two.
Okay.
So, I'll start. And the first one that I came up with is a film called Saloum. Have you guys seen Saloum?
No.
I think it's on Shudder right now. It's directed by Jean-Luc Herbelot, I think it's 2022. Set in 2003, a trio of mercenaries escaping a coup in Guinea-Bissau take refuge in a hidden region on the Saloum River in Senegal. But something from beyond the grave awaits them there. So it's kind of like a haunted house story that seeks to explore and examine, and again, kind of reckon with the idea of child soldiers and what happened to them after they became child soldiers and the abuses that were sort of put upon them as child soldiers. It's really cool. It's really good.
Okay.
So.
That sounds really good.
I'm going to let Devin go first.
Okay. I had two. Is that okay?
Yeah, no.
One, and then we go back around.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. I always need those detailed instructions.
We don't do that here.
My first one, I'll do one that it's previously released. This is old, but it is The Women of Brewster Place. It's a series, but it is now one big film. That's how I remember watching it in my youth. I remember watching it in a room full of black women. My Sunday dinner, they came over. Afterwards, my dad had gone off to watch the football game, all my aunts, cousins, everything. But it is a film truly of a apartment building of black women and how they band together and the society that they're in. And it definitely dives into the roles of how do I show up in society and conversations that are hard and still happening in the black community. And you've got some wonderful actors in it, Oprah being one. It was a film that I remember watching and craving those women's stories well into my teenage years, youth, and I still go back to it. And I would recommend it if you kind of like that dynamic of that sisterhood, that family that is chosen.
Excellent.
Mine is still kind of sticking with the horror theme of the month, but mine was Eve's Bayou by Cassie Lemons.
Truly
Just
one of my favorite films.
It's so good, and it's coming out. If it hasn't just come out on Criterion, it
November?
will come out. Yeah, it should be this next month. About a young girl and her sister, and she discovers that she potentially has powers, and that her dad is cheating on his mom, and kind of that dynamic as well. But another story that is told and presented and not really explained from a it's told from a black perspective, but it's not a black story necessarily. It is just a good movie,
right?
Presented to you by a wonderful, wonderful director
and a young Journey Smollett.
Yeah.
Yes. Who, as you said it, I was truly yelling out her line of "Get out the damn bathroom." But yes, love that film. Rewatch it frequently.
All right, my next one is Neptune Frost by Saul Williams. And did you pick that too?
No, but I did not. But yeah, please talk about it.
Yeah.
I want to shout this movie from the rooftops.
Yes.
And
Neptune Frost. Gotcha.
Go ahead. Go ahead. So we saw it together at a
okay.
We saw it at the Texas Theater. So on what was the opening weekend of it, right? When it first,
because I don't think it wouldn't have played for very long.
The one weekend
right.
it was here. So this is an intersex African hacker and a coltan miner, and the virtual Marvel born as a result of their union. That's what this film is about. This is a film. It's a musical. It's a kind of art piece. It's a film that examines colonialism, technology, capitalism, and kind of the intersecting and damaging impacts of those things.
Oh,
it is great.
And the title again?
Neptune Frost.
Yeah, Neptune Frost.
Okay.
It is like nothing you have or probably will ever see again.
I legit just thought in my head, that sounds like nothing I've ever seen. So I can't even form a bias or opinion of anything.
I feel like it's on one of the streamers right now. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And I guess you could categorize it under Afrofuturism.
Okay.
Right.
Which is what I mean. There's a big uptick in that right now. So yeah.
It's definitely worth checking out.
Oh, I like it. Okay. So mine is yet to be released. It comes out this month. It's on Netflix, and I have hope, but it's originally a play, and it is A Death of a King's Horseman, and it is going to the Igbo tribe, and right around the start of the First World War, and it is dealing with the impacts of colonialism, while also looking at, again, the impact of women, the feminine, in the community, and how pretty much they are able to keep the traditions. They are the bearers of the legacy, while also navigating, seeing this impact yet again happening on a continent that was once something and now is dealing with colonialism and death and the loss of culture and traditions and ways. And Brock, have you read the play?
No.
Because it is, I believe he's it's a playwright, and it is truly a Black African Igbo man playwright, and he won a whole bunch of prizes. But it is what we would teach in humanities instead of
Ibsen.
No, come on, the one that it will come to me after I have left here.
Chekhov.
Brutality, colonialism, from the perspective of a man. Oh, I've tried to block
Kipling?
it out. No. I've tried to block it out, and apparently
sorry.
I've succeeded. So, no, you confirmed for me that I have done the ultimate walk away.
When was the play?
Which is forgetting the book completely.
When was this play written?
He wrote it in the 1940s, I believe.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, but I hope the film is good, but I would recommend if you go and watch it and you're like, I want more, then go to the play, but it is really well done.
Okay. Cool.
And my other one was one I've already mentioned, which was Hollywood Shuffle, done by Robert Townsend. Mainly just because, again, this whole idea of just understanding a different perspective of how you watch movies and how a community has been shoehorned or put into these very narrow boxes of what they can represent on screen, and done so in a really funny and just eye-opening, but also just being hilarious in the way that they do it. I'm Gonna Get You Sucka from the Wayans is along those same lines, but those two movies kind of coming back to back, were just so much fun and really just, like I said, you don't realize how important that these types of movies are, and this type of art really is. And you mentioned listening to Digital Underground, and we kind of joke about it. But when I grew up, I was a small, I grew up in Amarillo in West Texas town. But I also grew up
Roscoe Sweetwater.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
The Midwest. So fuck you guys.
But I grew up on Run DMC and NWA, and again, it's this normalization, and that we're all in the same boat, and we're all, human, and these ideals. We fight against this fight. Maybe a strong term, but you hear all these, especially when I was growing up. Was why is there a need for BET, and why is there a need for, why do I have to see, why is it important that a Black person is on the commercial, doing normal things, right? And there's a Saturday Night Live skit from the mid 80s, or probably late 80s, with Kevin Nealon, and he's talking about how he's a TV writer, and it's all played for jokes, and it's kind of funny, but he's talking about how I can give a person named Wilson a lot of wealth, but if I have to, if a character name whose last name is Washington, has a lot of wealth, then I have to spend a whole lot of time writing out and explaining why it is, and that kind of, it's very pointed of where just seeing somebody like and again, for Will Smith being the Fresh Prince of and DJ Jazzy Jeff and these guys that were just suburban kids who were singing about their upbringing and also just connecting. I don't think when you dismiss movies like this and you try to find fault with them, or you try to focus on what seems to be the other, this is why these are important. This is why this, like you said, representation and having these people see themselves in a positive light on, in different and in real life scenarios that connect with them is so, and I'm not saying anything that's new here, but those movies are, Hollywood Shuffle and I'm Gonna Get You Sucka.
But I want to add to this too, because I was 11 years old and I was listening to Run DMC. I was listening to Eric B. and Rakim, and Big Daddy Kane, right? But I was also listening to Public Enemy, and that was the first time that I understood that popular music could do something more, could say something more, could spread this message in a way that made me go, oh shit. I wasn't listening to Joan Baez and Bob Dylan, like my father's music. I mean, that was my sort of like, no, I'm going to listen to this, because I was fully kind of, in Catholic school, right, with my Sony Walkman, listening to like all of this rap and hip hop, and so much of it was East Coast, and it was pushing back against this establishment. But that was the first time that I understood, right, that it could be used for a kind of protest, for a kind of statement, for a kind of middle finger. Right. And so it is important to acknowledge this. And yes, we're not saying anything new, but again, it's important to acknowledge where I get some of these ideas from.
Yeah, I was in high school. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was in high school when Tipper Gore and the whole push for the parental lyrics, explicit lyrics thing came out. I can remember having the NWA tape and like kind of taking a black marker and like so my mom wouldn't actually see it. But yeah, it's and so to that kind of censorship and to oppression of the medium to even get into the hands of a culture that could desperately use it and see it as eye-opening I mean, like I said, the whole plight is I don't know what it is.
So that I'm thinking, also acknowledging what you all have just said, but the film that you recommended, are you excited for The Spook by the Door to come out in?
I am. And so that I do a weekly online screening, and I actually showed The Spook by the Door, the original. Yeah. And it's impossible to find, and it's on YouTube. That's a movie that it came out, and then immediately they shut the doors on it. They pulled it from theaters and weren't letting anybody show it. It was so incredible, and it's just that whole story is really. But yeah, I am.
Ooh, that's actually my friend Shasta that I went and saw this with. We love watching the olds. So with the one that Barbra Streisand did and Lady Gaga just did, the love story that's not a rom-com.
A Star is Born?
Yes, A Star is Born. We went all the way back to the 30 version with Judy Garland and watched it all the way. We will definitely be doing this now that you've told me it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
With this film. Yeah.
It's good. It's really, really good. And it's really, really surprising because again, they had the book. They knew what the book was. Right. They made, and again, it was just the studio was like, oh yeah, no, we can't have this. Right. So we got to pull this out.
Did you listen to the podcast 1619 Project? Because they do have an episode on cinema and like culture, and they talk about these things. Actually, it was a really good episode.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, my third film is Widows by Steve McQueen, starring Viola Davis. Right? And so this is a story of four women whose husbands leave them whose small-time criminal husbands leave them in debt to Brian Tyree Henry and Daniel Kaluuya. And Viola Davis is kind of the leader. But this is, again, it's a movie about women taking charge, women determining their own destiny, women pushing back against not only the men that sort of abandon them, but then the men who are threatening them. It's also a film, it's set in Chicago, so it's a film that has to reckon with that city's own kind of racism, that city's own kind of gentrification, ongoing gentrification. There's a really good scene of where Colin Farrell, who's an alderman, and he just gave a speech in a poor neighborhood, a socioeconomically depressed neighborhood, and he gets in his car and he drives back home, and the camera is like mounted on the hood of the car, and so you're watching the neighborhood, and the neighborhood just changes in just a block. Yeah. But again, this really cool representation of how gentrification works, of how this kind of socioeconomic disparity is just such a thin line in neighborhoods. So
yeah, I love that film.
It's so good.
I've been seeking it out and trying to find it in other ways, but it is it.
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah. My third film is Daughters of the Dust, also old but good, but I love it because that that impact between women, Black women, and again, how you see that carry just across time and everybody's own interaction in that family in that way also just truly is beautifully done. Again, something I saw young and has always stayed with me and is hard to find. I will give you a heads up. to watch, but thankfully the director, I'm seeing she's coming back around more. I don't know, there was some just like lapse in her projects for a while there, and now I'm seeing her pop back up and doing some really cool things. So there's also that. Tap into her work if you cannot find the actual film, but it was really good, really well done.
My last one may be a cheat, but I'm going to go with Jordan Peele's Nope.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I mean, again, it's not necessarily. It's just another black storyteller.
I've not seen this, so
I won't spoil it for you.
Oh, you can't. I'm not a big one.
What I would say is the interaction between the brother and the sister. Again, it wants to speak to it's just so authentic. There's just scenes where they interact with one another, and the handshakes that they do, and the way that they kind of give each other a side eye throughout that whole entire movie. That brother-sister dynamic, I think, is not really spoken about when people talk about this movie. And it's so much what I enjoyed about the movie was that, because Daniel Kaluuya is this kind of like he's kind of bottled up. His dad has been killed. He's now taking on the
I can see him playing that well.
Right. Yeah. And this idea of him having to take over the family business, and he doesn't seem like he really wants to be doing it. And his sister is boisterous and kind of wanting to do her own thing. But with the way that those two interact with one another, it's really kind of the lifeblood of that movie, and it really just, I don't know, it just really spoke to me.
Yeah, the Kiki Palmer Daniel Kaluuya dynamic was great because they couldn't be more opposite in terms of how you see them, I think, as actors, but then how they work that in the film. It's
their chemistry.
So
I mean, if you would have told me that they were actually brother and sister, I would have believed it.
Because they had that sibling annoyance with each other too, right? And they don't have to say anything. You're just like, oh, he's so fucking tired of her nonsense.
Which I did see in some interviews. I love the one where she's trying out the British slang, and he's like, I told you don't have to do it. And she's Kiki and like, no, I'm gonna do this. I love it, and goes into a story. That is that person again, because I'm scary. I was like, I don't know if I can watch this. And I have stuck with Jordan Peele through Get Out and Us, but Us kind of. I was like, sir, it took me a while to not be like, don't step over that grate. Walk around thing.
There's a lot less. I would say Nope is a lot more Twilight Zoney than it is scary.
Nice.
There is a segment that is pretty violent.
Loves Twilight Zone.
But and he did the whole reboot.
But the monster isn't as monstrous.
Okay.
Right.
I can do
in terms of presentation.
It's definitely, this veers more towards early M. Night Shyamalan for me than it does, and not to but
it's better than early.
Of course. I think not early M. Night Shyamalan.
I think Jordan Peele.
Not to go too far off on a tangent, but
that's what we do here.
But like Signs, regardless how you feel about the overall reveal and the plot of that movie, there hasn't been a better shot film in a really long time. The way that he frames his scenes and the way that he builds tension, especially early in his career when he wasn't just so beholden. I mean, like, he was still beholden to the twist, but we weren't quite to that point where he had kind of run out of them.
Right.
That string of films that he did with Unbreakable, Signs, and Sixth Sense were real, and by the time he got to Signs and he had the budget to really truly put money in it.
Yeah, correct.
The way that he framed those shots and those scary moments was amazing.
Yeah, as you were talking, I flashed back to like a couple of scenes, and I was like, he did it well. He did. Yes.
Yeah, this is the scene where the obviously the cornfield scene where the foot slips back into the cornfield, but the scene with Joaquin Phoenix, and I don't know why we keep talking about Joaquin Phoenix.
We do. Podcast. He comes up like every time.
Well, I mean, he's had a long career though, for real. And he knows how to pick a film.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. But when he's got the foil hat on and he's like with you, like leaning into the TV, watching the alien cross the yard there, that is an amazing scene. That is a jump out of your seat.
I do now wonder about Stacy Keach in an M. Night Shyamalan film. That's
the ultimate.
Yeah.
But I remember exactly where it was when I watched Sixth Sense for the first time. Basketball camp, went swimming, came back. They were in the lobby watching it, and I was like, "What are we watching?" And just jumped right in. And everybody afterwards was like, "That was great!" A bunch of teenage girls, 11 years old.
Oh, so you hadn't had it ruined for you then?
No.
You're watching on a video, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
We probably weren't supposed to, but college kids run the basketball camp, so who cares?
Right, sure.
They're probably not supposed to be doing what they were doing either at the time.
Where were they?
It was PG-13, so there wasn't a whole lot of gore. I saw that at the Cinemark Hollywood, which just recently got shut down for COVID off 635.
I know.
Well, it got shut down past COVID. It was not doing well. Yeah.
A lot of them are just...
Well, that's the thing, too. And we talk about, and I know we probably have to wrap up, but we talk about what's next. And Gina's had the luxury of being able to pick and choose which movies that she's wanted to do. And the only thing that really has fallen apart for her was the Silver and Black movie,
right? Which
was the Silver Sable and Black Cat film that she put on hold because she didn't like the script and she was waiting. And then she made The Old Guard and it kind of fell apart. I don't know. The Woman King to me is really interesting because as of big, huge blockbuster films, this feels like outside of Top Gun Maverick, really the only one that's been this year that's kind of been. I mean, Halloween performs lackluster. It's been such a weird time where it's hard to pick out what has done well and what hasn't. But this movie doing well, but I don't know how many. Obviously you've got Black Adam, you got all the comic book movies that are coming out, and you've got Wakanda Forever coming out. But I don't know what the future of these types of movies are, and I don't know what the future what Gina's actually going to do. Hopefully she gets to do whatever the hell she wants to do. Right. Honestly, I'm not really sure I want to see her go into the Marvel churn and pick out something unless she feels like she can bring something new to the table. Unless there's an said
that, I was like, oh yeah, I guess that is kind of now the pathway.
Right. Well, they pick out all these and so you go Disney in some form or another, right? And yeah. Or otherwise, you go Universal, which was the Colin Trevorrow, the Jurassic Park things. But so the idea of going to these gigantic $200 million tentpole movies, which for the most part are terrible. I hope that's not the case here.
I hope not either, because I am excited for what is next from her, for sure. But I hope it's not because there's a formula there.
Right.
And I don't want to see her do her version of the Eternals. I don't want to.
That is true.
Yeah. I just don't. I want to see Chloe Zhao go back to the writer and can we just forget about Nomadland, please, and the Eternals. I'm sorry, I'm not a fan of Nomadland.
Oh, I think you're the first person, but also
I know I'm a fucking subversive.
No, I was gonna say I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. It fits. But I think you're right. Speaking of Jordan Peele, we like what he's doing. We want him to keep doing it. We're also getting kind of probably nervous of where else are you going with this, bud?
Well, I'm worried that Peele is going to fall into the Shyamalan territory. And so Shyamalan couldn't get out of his own way and couldn't tell a different story. And then when he tried to, he took a beloved property and then ran it into the ground with Avatar. Right. And so I'm worried. And then he had to completely deconstruct and go back to $5 million movies that he was self-financing and then taking them to Bloom to do anything else. Mm-hmm. And that seemingly has kind of pulled him out of this quagmire. But I'm worried that Jordan, I think that he's a more intelligent storyteller than M. Night has been. And I have a little bit more faith. So we'll see. But I would love for him to do I would love for him to do some sort of straight movie that's not based in horror or not based in some sort of mystery.
I know he loves it, but I feel like he has the skill set to do it. I think he does, and you're right. Can he get out of his way, or is somebody in his circle challenge yourself? I'm a no-care challenge you, bud. I know you can do better. I know you can do a different way. I know there's way more room for you as a just overall talent to go in different places, push people who you'll bring together, kind of like y'all were saying with their dynamic. I would love a straight, truly. He could do it well. Yeah. He could. Or maybe just, I don't know. Yeah, what? Give us something.
So, Devin, how do we listen to your podcast?
Oh, it is still because
when can we listen to your podcast?
It is fully
what should we look
done.
Out for? All right.
2020 kind of halted it. Not gonna lie, but it is on Spotify and it is still on Apple.
What's next?
And it is truly a Goodman's education conversation and just breaking down education for you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Devin, we're so happy you were able
thank
to
you
join
so much.
us
This was so
today.
much fun.
Thank you for
great.
having me. This was such a treat.
Yeah, this was wonderful.
For our listeners, we're going to be talking. We're going to go back into our direct. We're going to start a director series moving forward in the next episode. We'll be hitting up Paul Schrader, which we've kind of hinted at over the past few episodes. We're going to do. I don't necessarily know if we're going to do them all back to back, but our first pass through Schrader will be his early years: Blue Collar, American Gigolo, and Hardcore. And Blue Collar, very interesting early Richard Pryor film.
Yaphet Kotto.
Yaphet Kotto, yeah. So
I thought I recognized it, but
it's. Have you ever seen Bone, by the way? With the Larry Cohen's first film and a Yaphet Kotto kind of home invasion film for him. That's really, really interesting.
Yes,
I'd check it out for sure.
okay.
yeah.
And I don't know where it's available. Probably, I would imagine it's on Prime or maybe Tubi, but
It was on Criterion.
Okay.
It may be gone now because it may have been one of those like curated kind of
Right.
series they did, but because that's where I saw it and I forgot the name of it. But he's so menacing in that.
Yeah, and it's one of those. It's one of those early '70s kind of precursor to blaxploitation films, where Yaphet Kotto is the main character, and he it's kind of he does this home invasion of this kind of really terrible white couple, and it's his interaction and how but their interaction with one another as they're kind of stuck in this house together.
Oh, I think I have actually seen this again in my youth, and just did not. Yes, I think I have because I'm thinking of just conversations that happened when the film turned off in my household.
Right.
Yes, I'll have to go back though. Say it again for me, please.
Bone. It's just called Bone.
Okay, Bone.
And the one we'll be talking about is Blue Collar, which is Yaphet Kotto and Richard Pryor.
And Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. That'll be the Schrader series, the early years. Anything else we need to touch on?
That's it for me.
Devin, thanks again so much.
Thank you all for having me. This was wonderful.
Absolutely.
And thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right.
Bye.
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you liked today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time.